Okay.
Okay, so I have to start by telling you I've been a little bit in crisis, just as a warning. My computer died Sunday night. Monday morning, I raced to the Apple store and bought a new one, 1 hour before cataract surgery. And then on Tuesday, it was supposed to be ready, and I bought one that wouldn't work for converting my data. So I raced back yesterday and bought a different one and converted the data. And then this afternoon, I'm like, oh, it seems to work. And suddenly my system froze and started ringing alarms saying I had a Trojan virus. So I spent the afternoon with Apple. So anything could happen.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Just warning you. Hopefully this slideshow works. So let me see if I can do it. Ooh. Are you seeing anything?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You see that?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so no
Perfect.
offense, but I'm going to get rid of you guys if I can. Oops. Okay. All right. So let me start by saying, I think a lot of you know, I went for Kiwi Christmas. I was gone for 47 days, December through January. And I really felt like there were two chapters to this trip. We spent the first part of the trip with family time. So those are my three sons in that picture in the upper right. They all managed to make it there. The one on the far left is the one who lives on a boat in New Zealand. And then the far right is the one in Oregon, and the one in the middle is from California. So all three of them came, and we had a lot of adrenaline type adventures. And then the second part of the trip, we went on basically a hiking tour with a group called Active Adventures. And so it's sort of these two different things. Uh-oh, it's not advancing. Okay, there we go. So just to tell you a little bit about New Zealand, I forgot to ask, have many of you been there? I know, Susan, you have.
No.
Yes,
Oh.
I have been there. Yeah.
I've been
Okay.
there also.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been there also.
Okay, so maybe you guys know a lot of this stuff. The lines in red are what we did. So the North Island, we flew into Auckland and we drove up to the Bay of Islands, which is the little towns of Opua and Paia are there. And that's where my son's boat is. We worked our way down to Rotorua, and then we flew out of Auckland to the South Island. And the South Island, you can tell we sort of circumnavigated it, doing some time with the boys in Queenstown and Milford Sound, and then some hiking in the Southern Alps. So that's the terrain that we covered. You probably know that New Zealand is not all that big. It's the size of Colorado. Its population is small. It's a little less than Massachusetts. There's like 19 people per square kilometer. So lots of land for the number of people. They have 4 major industries, and our tour guides would always say 4 ifs. We have the 4 ifs: fishing, forestry, farming, and tourism, the foreigners. It was first established in 1280 by the Polynesians, and they established the Maori culture. And today it's mostly European descent, and the Maoris are a minority, which they're fighting hard to preserve. And interestingly, they were the first country that had minimum wage and where women could vote. So that's kind of cool. So I thought I'd maybe just give some impressions that I had as we spent this time in New Zealand. We heard constantly about extinction of birds, mostly of the birds, because they only had one indigenous mammal, and that was the bat. So all these other animals were introduced as people came to New Zealand, and it's been really harmful to their bird population. So dogs were brought over in stoats, and rats came on ships, and they've done incredible damage, causing extinction to a lot of birds. They had a lot of gold mining origins. Most of the towns you go to started because of gold mining. They have a lot of concern about climate change and environmental impact. They struggle with a lot of volcanoes, earthquakes, and glacier melt. And so they're concerned a lot about the impact to their climate, to their environment of climate change. They've developed a lot of big tourism business, and it's a lot of outdoor activities, a lot of them adrenaline activities. It's a very vast, expansive, rugged terrain. And so that picture in the upper right is typically what much of the South Island looks like. There's sheep, cattle, deer, birds, and lots of those sheep. A lot of hiking. We struggled a little bit in some spots with sandflies. I deem them way worse than mosquitoes. And as I mentioned, they have, earthquakes and volcanoes. So what I pictured down the bottom and on the two sides, that's a kiwi, if you've never seen one. They're kind of big old birds. They are very vulnerable because they're nocturnal and they do not fly. And so as rats and dogs and creatures have been introduced, these birds have been at tremendous risk. And to top it off, they only do one egg a year. And it takes 2 or 3 days for that bird to get out of the egg, and 75 to 85 days for it to hatch. These kiwi are pretty big. They're 20 inches tall and up to 6 pounds, and their nostrils are way at the tip of the bill. So they have an incredible sense of smell, which is untypical for birds. They have a 30 to 40 year lifespan. And the males sit on the eggs when they're trying to hatch them. And it takes a long time, as I said, 75 to 85 days. And when they're hatched, they kind of abandon those chicks. And many of them are killed in the first 6 months. So we've heard about various projects that they've had in New Zealand to try to rescue the kiwis. It's a pretty daunting effort. But one of the things that they were telling us about in the South Island is they go into the woods and they try to find them, which is really hard because they blend in with the forest floor. And again, they're nocturnal, but they find them, they put trackers on them. And when they have their eggs, they go in and take the eggs from them, bring them to Franz Joseph to a place there and hatch the eggs. Then they take the eggs and bring them to an island so that the chicks can grow and survive and not be threatened. And after that, they bring them back into the woods where they took them. So it's cost them about $10,000 a bird to do that. So they obviously can't sustain doing that, but they've grown this diminishing, nearly extinct population by a significant amount. And so it's been somewhat successful. But what they're really trying to do is get rid of the base problem of all of these rats and stoats and weasels. And so on the bottom right, that box you see everywhere when you're hiking. It's like every 50 yards, you see one of those. And the inside of it, the picture above it, they put an egg in there, and that attracts those animals. And they're hoping that that will put a dent in them. It's pretty daunting with all the property to imagine that that is going to have a huge effect. Anyway, so we heard these stories about extinction all over the place. They talked about the forest as well, that 80% of the land was deforested at one point. And the New Zealand trees, the indigenous ones, were very slow growing. So they've brought in a couple hundred species in different areas to try to see what would work and to try to get fast growing trees to try to put the tree, get the tree growth going again. So it was all pretty interesting the way that they've been struggling with all of these issues. One other example I'll tell you quickly is the farmers have been trying to clear their fields by taking all the rocks and making big piles of those. And the geckos wound up infesting those rocks. And because they are at risk, they declared that they could not remove those rock piles because the geckos were in them. So it's pretty interesting. So this is our North Island part of our family adventure, and these are the things we did. I just picked a few of these to tell you about, but this is the list of things that we did with the kids, and you can see that they're mostly, either drinking or kayaking or mud baths, go-karts, mountain bikes, stuff like that. My son's boat is in the right-hand side. It's a 53-foot boat, and it's in the Bay of Islands, which is in the north part of the North Island. It's called that because there are more than 140 subtropical islands there. And they're really known for their undeveloped beaches, big game fishing, and Maori cultural artifacts. We made it to the Waitangi Treaty Grounds, and there were three notable things here. One is the Wakatua, which is a war canoe. So waka means canoe, and the taua means army or war party. And these are enormous canoes that are made out of hollowed out trees, and they're manned by up to 80 paddlers, and they're about 130 feet long. It's pretty amazing. They take this out once a year. These large wakas are usually very elaborately carved and decorated, and they have a main hull that's formed from a single hollowed out log, and they have a carved upright head and tailboard, and they're considered sacred. And the men enter these over the sides, never over the front. And they use these in battle at sea, and they ram another enemy's waka midship at high speed and try to tip it over. So it was pretty fascinating to see how those were made and that they still take them out and use them. The treaty part of this is that a treaty was formed between Britain and the Maori chiefs. And the treaty was to establish a British governor in New Zealand while giving the Maori ownership of their lands and properties. And so they were giving them the rights of British subjects. And the Maoris were looking for protection from the French. And so they agreed to do this. They felt it was kind of a relationship that was being made between them and Britain. And of course, it evolved to be a little bit different than they had hoped it would be. But it was pretty interesting because this is where that treaty was signed. And it was recognizing the Maori owning the lands and the forests and other things, and giving them rights, while giving the British Crown the ability to declare sovereignty over New Zealand. And that, of course, wound up in a struggle and some battles between them. And then the third thing is the Maori is trying to really preserve their culture. And as a minority, that's a struggle for them. And so they have these centers as places to try to educate people and expose them to some of their traditions and cultural things. And so we went to one of the ceremonial experiences. And one of the things they do is they say that pick someone from your group to represent you and be your chief. And so there on the right is my oldest son in that green neon hat. And they told him he was our chief representing our group. And the Maori are going to come to him and try to figure out whether he's there in peace or not. And they do that by dropping a little piece of a branch. And if he picks it up, then he's come in peace. And if not, they beat the crap out of him with that stick. So, and then you go inside and they perform quite a number of dances, and you see them throwing the sticks here, and it was pretty fascinating. So I'll show you a little bit. Tell me if the sound does not work. Hopefully it will. They take it very seriously. One of the guys told my son that at a different one of these, the tourist started to laugh, probably because he was nervous, and the guy hit him in the face with a stick and it broke his jaw. So it was pretty crazy. So the other thing they're known for is the haka, which is a stamping of the feet that's done rhythmically, shouting accompaniment. They do it for great achievements, occasions, funerals, or preparing for war. A lot of people know them from soccer games. They've kind of adopted the haka, but here's a little piece of that. Look at their tongue. Anyway, moving on. We then went across the water to, you take a little ferry to go over there to a town called Russell. It's such an adorable place on the water. It's awesome. But in the early days, it was known as a hellhole. It was called that because the minority were trying to trade with the Europeans for food, and they offered food and prostitution. And so the people looking across at this consider this a hellhole spot, but it's really charming now. It's lined with remnants from its early days as the first colonial capital, and it was really a great little place to visit. Very close to it was the Amato Estate Winery, and it's one of the best wineries I've gone to. Beautiful views, great food, the wine was fabulous. It was just a really great, peaceful spot to go to. Then we decided to try something called zorbing. So the idea of zorbing is you get into these big balls. It's almost like those hamster balls, and you roll down the mountain in them. And so the balls look really slow moving, but really inside, it's like being in a dryer. I'll show you a little bit of that. Let me go back and forward it a little. Look, you can see my son inside there.
Is there some water in it?
There's some water in it, yeah.
Yeah, his is the best.
I have to tell you, it's a blast. We just laughed the whole time through it. It's really hilarious. One of the other things I did, I wanted to tell you about because it was pretty interesting, is we did a late day sea kayak trip across a lake. And on the other side of the lake, we went to a hot springs area, which is on the right. So it's the only way you can get to it is by the lake. And the hot springs are coming out of the up higher and working their way down. And so they've created these different pools, 4 or 5 of them, that are different temperatures as the water gets closer to the lake. And they clean them out and drain them every night. So they're very clean. And they were really awesome. They were very relaxing. While we were soaking in the hot tubs, our tour guide was cooking us a steak dinner. So it was really cool. And when we got done with that, we went across a lake into a glowworm cave. I don't know if any of you guys have ever done that, but I was fascinated. I didn't know anything about it. And we tucked the kayaks into the cave. It was pretty tight. And they turned the lights out. At this time, it was night, so we turned our headlamps off, and it was like being in a planetarium. It was lit up as if it was the most amazing starlit sky that you'd ever see with these glowworms. They live in those caves for like 7 years, and there's these long, stringy, like sticky things hanging down, which is where they catch bugs. And after the 7 years, they turn into butterflies and they fly out of the cave. And then in a frenzy, they mate for 2 weeks and then they die. So they have a short, amazing life. And then when we came out of the kayaks, the sky looked like that. So it was a pretty amazing and different kind of experience. This picture down the bottom, they gave us all these like black sweatshirts to wear. And we really thought we looked like a cult. It was very strange, except for the goofy looking river rat guy behind us. Mud baths, a lot of geothermal experiences there. So this was in Rotorua, and they had hot spring pools and then these mud baths where you just coat yourself with this mud, and I guess it's supposed to be good for you. We then went to the South Island. Had to stick a baby picture in here. That's little Lucas. And on the South Island, we went to some of the small towns. A lot of these towns originated as mining towns, and they're very quaint, very cute. We drove on what's called the Crown Range Road, which is one of these very steep, no guardrails, curving roads that goes way up the mountainsides. It's a pretty amazing ride in the Cardrona area. And near the top of this is an old Cardrona Hotel, which is a pretty cool spot, and something they call Bra-drona, which I'll show you. Lake Wanaka is a beautiful lake there, and they have this silly lone tree in the lake that is the most photographed. We did some four-wheel drive riverbed off-roading, some jet boats, Milford Sound, of course, a little bungee jumping. Lake Tikapoo, which is one of the most beautiful colored lakes, and Mount Cook, we did a helicopter glacier landing. So those were the South Island activities. So there's the Cardrona Hotel. My son had heard from a friend that they are known to have the best burger in New Zealand, so we absolutely had to go there. The back of the hotel, it has these glass little, they look like greenhouses, and then a picnic area, and then all kinds of like funky types of things, tractors, all kinds of unusual things, beautiful gardens. And it was just a great stop, a great place to eat. The burger was good, but it was lamb-based, which is not my favorite thing, so it wouldn't be my favorite. This bra fence, this is a strange phenomena. Between Christmas in 1998 and New Year's in 1999, for no reason that anyone knows, 4 bras were hung on a wire fence along the roadside. Again, nobody knows why that happened, but the news of it spread, and pretty soon people started leaving more bras, and more bras and more bras. And so some locals welcomed the fence and thought, oh, this is a cool tourist attraction. But others thought, oh, this is an eyesore and this is embarrassing and it's a hazard to drivers using the road. And so over and over, they would remove all these bras, and then word would get out that they were removed, and then more would show up. So they just kept coming. So on April in 2006, they discovered that the fence was on a public road reserve. And so the local council determined that the bra fence was a traffic hazard and an eyesore, and they ordered the bras on the fence to be removed. But the removal of the fence led to an attempt to create the longest bra chain in the world. And so they had a big festival in Wanaka later that year, and they were able to get 7,400 bras on the fence and turned it into a fundraiser where they got $10,000 for breast cancer. So the bottom right is kind of the views that you're seeing driving in Crown Range Road. It was absolutely spectacular. And now I'm just going to show you how extensive this bra fence is. That's a lot of bras. So here we are doing, in the upper left, we had these electric four-wheel drive Jeeps that we took along a riverbed, and they were really, really fun. It's some significant off-roading. The bottom is Milford Sound. Any of you have been to New Zealand, I'm sure you've been there. It's absolutely magnificent. And on the right are jet boats. And the jet boats are very fun because they go through these canyons, and you truly look like you're inches away from smashing into the canyon walls. They are jet boats, so they don't draw anything. They draw like 4 inches, so they can get really close to the rocks. They're pretty fun. Milford Sound, spectacular place to go out on one of the boats, and they take you around the sound, see the waterfalls, see the seals. It's just magnificent scenery. This was a helicopter trip we took. You see the glacier waters there, and we're at the Tasman Glacier. So the aqua water is caused by what they call glacier flower, which is just the silt. And we are at about 6,000 feet there. And then to top it off, of course, we needed to do a bungee jump. So this little cage thing on the left is what they use to take you out from, take you out over the canyon to get into this little house that you're going to jump out of. So I'll show you that. I hang onto this guy's wrist and I don't want to let it go.
You can do it, Mom. Let's go.
This guy's saying, let go of my wrist.
Go, Mom. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bungee. Yeah.
Okay. So that's the end of that part of the trip. And then for the remaining time from the 9th to the 22nd, we, fortunately, we were with this tour group. I say fortunately because I would not have liked to have planned all the places to stay and eat. They were very booked up at this time of year, and to worry about getting hiking permits and things like that. So this was really a good thing for us to have done. The company, Active Adventures, is 70% women, which I thought was really cool. I didn't really know that when I signed up for it. Our 2 guides are right there. They're 20-something and early 30s. The one on the left drove that big bus that was pulling that trailer behind it. And she was just amazing. And these 2 girls were beasts. They just did everything. They'd drive the bus, tell you about the history, lead the hikes. As soon as we were back from the hikes, they'd give you your keys to your room. They'd go off to immediately make appetizers for you and cook dinner. They were just on the go all the time. They were really amazing. We had 14 hikers in this group, and the age range was pretty sizable. It's like 20 years. We did 12 hikes, including the one that nearly killed me, which was a 3-day 2-hut circuit. We did some sea kayaking. That was pretty interesting. Wine tasting, Milford Sound, something called the Alp to Ocean Bike Trail for anyone who loves biking. That was magnificent. And then we saw a few of these small, quaint mining towns. So that's our group. They were fit. There were significant bike people there and people who hike constantly, and they hike all over the world, and they were in really good shape. And they had trained. We trained 0. So the first hike we did, and I'm not going to tell you about all the hikes, but I just want to give you an example. The first hike we did on the first day there was called the Sealy Trans Hike, and it was in the Mount Cook area, and it was 4,400 steps. So that was a pretty challenging start. And unfortunately for me, I had somewhere along the line with this trip developed a, how do I describe it? A sore butt, a sacroiliac joint problem. And so the 2 things that you shouldn't do if you have that is stairs and sit too long. And so just before this hike, I sat on the bus for 5 hours one day and 5 hours the next, and then did this hike. So not a smart move. But anyway, the picture on the left is we are nearly at the top of that hike, and the views were just breathtaking. The picture on the right is from a different hike, but it's typical of the kind of scenery that you're seeing when you hike the Alps. So these are the Southern Alps that we were doing most of our hiking in. The Southern Alps run about 310 miles. The highest peak is Mount Cook, which is 12,218 feet. There's quite a number of other points that are also pretty high, nearly 10,000. And they have about 3,000 glaciers in their southern peaks, including the Tasman Glacier, which is the one we had flown to, and is the longest glacier, but has had significant retreating. It's retreated a fair bit since just 20 years ago. They get a lot of rain on the west coast of New Zealand, which is where these Alps run. It can range from 120 inches a year in one area to 590 inches near the main divide. And that really helps the growth of the glaciers above the snow line. The area does lie along a plate boundary, so it's part of the Pacific Ring of Fire. And these mountains are raised continually by tectonic pressure, where the plates are pushing together and raising it up, but also causing the risk of earthquakes on these alpine fault. So we were in this Mount Cook area, and it was interesting that, different people have climbed it, including Hillary, who's spent a good amount of his climbing training in New Zealand. And interestingly, a woman named Frida Dufour climbed Mount Cook in 1910. And because it wasn't proper for a woman to be alone with a man, that she was required to have 2 male escorts. And because women couldn't wear pants, she climbed it in a skirt with pantaloons. So pretty impressive. This is, next I'm just going to throw you some scenery, because that's so much of what New Zealand is about, is lots of beautiful scenery. That's Lake Wanaka below. We hiked up this, and there's our guide on the left. I don't know if you'd be able to hear her, but she's explaining to us that we're looking out. You don't see it in this picture, but you will in this clip. We're looking at an island in Lake Wanaka, and the island in the lake has a lake on the island. So this is her telling that. And we were always teasing them about their accent and how they said things. And so one of the words she was always working on was to say, now we're going to the bar.
All right, fun fact everyone, this island on the left has a lake on it, and it has an island in that lake. So it has an island on a lake and an island on a lake and an island in the ocean. And the island is called Moatapu Island. So shall we head down and head to the bar? That's so embarrassing.
More scenery. So upper left is when we did the hut hike. This is the lake that was at the top of that mountain. In the middle is some of the terrain. The clouds are beneath us, and it was pretty rugged stuff. We were doing some bouldering and pretty physical challenging climbing. On the right is a view of Mount Cook with a beautiful aqua-colored lake that has that kind of glacier silt in it. On the bottom right are some structures on the west coast where they have a blowhole. The water comes charging in and then shooting up, and it's pretty fantastic. In the middle is another shot, I think, of the Lake Wanaka area. And then on the far bottom left is Lake Tikapu, which is a beautiful aqua lake. This was the riverbed that we did our off-roading in. It was pretty spectacular, and we were the only ones there. It's really beautiful. Here, I'm just trying to show you some of the different terrain that we were hiking in. So we had our fair share of suspension bridges. We did a fair bit of forest hiking where the paths were soft and it was really quiet in there. It was pretty beautiful. Waterfalls everywhere. Most of them not as sizable as that one. lots of bouldering. And this is a view in the Queenstown area on the bottom center, where we're sitting in a structure called the Basket of Hope. So the hike that damn near killed me, this hike was long hike the first day, staying in a hut, then hiking a pretty significant ascent. We were hiking from 9 in the morning till 5:30 at night and staying at a hut at the top of the mountain. And then the next day coming down, and I really thought the down was going to be go up a little and then just come down. And I'm really good at downs. I love going down, but it turned out it wasn't that. It was going to be a very significant climb on that final day. A lot of up, a lot of really rough climbing, and a ridgeline hike. 2/3 of the hike would be on the ridge, and then we would head down. And I kept thinking, how can I get out of this? Can they send a helicopter in to get me? I can't do this. And then they thought it might be windy and we might have to go back the way we came, which would have been even worse. So it was pretty challenging mentally and physically. But it turned out that ridgeline was one of the best hikes I've ever done in my life. It was absolutely gorgeous. The views were incredible, and it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. But they did have these signs a fair bit, because it's pretty serious hiking, and the guides were very more stringent than they were on any other hike. They were like, you cannot get ahead of us. We have to be behind you. We have to stay with you no matter what. It was much more serious. But a lot of these signs saying, okay, this is where you're at. This is what you have to go. What's the weather like? How are you feeling? You better think this over. And then on the right, we had to immediately, as we started the hike, do a river crossing. And this river wasn't terribly fast moving and it wasn't terribly deep, but it can be. And so they wanted to make sure that we knew the technique for how to get across this river. So we did it in 2 different groups, and then we walk right through it, which I thought was crazy because we're at the start of the hike and now our feet and shoes are completely soaked. But it was summer, so we didn't even really feel that. It wasn't really a problem. But you put your arm between the back and the backpack of the person next to you. And so you're all kind of synced up. Only the people on end have poles. You walk in sync. You walk a little bit of an angle. The rocks are quite slippery on the riverbed. And so they're really wanting to make sure that no one goes down with their pack. And so they were trying to teach us the safety procedure. So this is them crossing. It looks kind of silly. I have never deliberately walked through water like that.
Up onto the bank.
Yay! Big accomplishment. So this is what the scenery was like. It's hard to capture, but it's absolutely breathtaking. And it's hard to quite grasp the scale of it all. You can maybe see a little, if you look on the right, you can see some of the hikers going up. And so that's what we were scaling up, that stuff. That second day, heading for the ridgeline, we were climbing up those rocks on the left, and we were in a pretty significant altitude. It was about 5,000 feet, so it was a little more challenging getting acclimated with your breathing, but pretty significant hike. And then we were headed right up to the top, and that's where the ridgeline is. And you can see the little people up there. That's us. And the views from the ridgeline, they were just really so expansive and beautiful. And if you look closely, you can see tiny little people. So that's it for the hiking. And these are just a few quirky things. Unusual sights. That picture in the upper right, we saw that in many bathrooms. And I just was like dumbfounded, like, do you really have to tell people not to get up on the toilets? I would break my neck if I did that. But somebody told me that because a lot of people in the Asian areas do the squat bathrooms, that they wanted to make sure they weren't going to do that on the toilet seats. This public toilet thing, there's an Australian guy, Hunter Wasser. I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but he's created a lot of things around the world. And he wound up in this town, Kawakawa, and he created this bathroom, and he's known for using recycled materials, tile, a lot of glass, colored glass. And he created this public bathroom, and it's like a tourist attraction. And then in the bottom right, we did a lot of driving. That's my son driving. And if you look through the window, you see this giant building of sheep heads. So just some of the strange sights we were seeing there. Just a sampling of the kind of lodging we were in. So we stayed in these little chalets. It was just for 1 or 2 people. The bottom left is our view in Queenstown. And this is my husband sitting on the bed looking out the window. So a very beautiful hotel on the lake in Queenstown. The next shot is what the huts look like inside. You're just laying mattress next to mattress of whoever has a reservation in the hut. And these huts on the mountaintops are booked way ahead. And so you can be lying next to anybody. For us, it was pretty much our group who at this point we had come to know fairly well. And so that's me repacking my bag. The hut has an outhouse that you have to navigate to at night if you need to go. And that was a little challenging because of these tall grasses. And so unfortunately, I had to make a few trips, and it was sleeting out, and those tall grasses were like slapping my legs. But that's the hut in the upper right on the mountaintop. It's the Angelius hut. And there's just nothing up there but that hut, and it's on the water. It's absolutely beautiful. Beautiful deck and beautiful views. This is Mount Cook, and I took this picture from my bed. So, I mean, the lodging was just amazingly different places, and the views were just breathtaking. Food, a little bit about food. My son ate that thing in the upper left. We have a tradition where the boys cook a Christmas Eve dinner for us when we're together, which is less and less these days. But that was the meal they cooked down below. And so they were lamb burgers, and they did lots of toppings. And one of the traditional New Zealand things is to put beets in your burger. And of course, eggs. So that was different. A few coal mining towns. In fact, many of the towns originated as coal mining towns, including Queenstown. So the left picture with the statue, that is Queenstown, which is on a lake. And on the right side is also Queenstown. It's bustling, a lot of tourism, a lot of bars, a lot of activity, and a lot of the adventure activities originate out of Queenstown. In the center is a small little town called Cromwell, and they've preserved the kind of historic old coal mining town look. And then the lower part with the dock is also Queenstown. And the bottom left is a coal mining town called Arrowtown, which is a very cute historic little town as well. That's us claiming victory on one of those big hikes. And again, pretty breathtaking views. And lastly, got to stick this little guy in. That's little Lucas in his Christmas outfit. So I think that's it. Yeah, that's more bungee. Probably don't need more of that. If I can figure out how to stop it. Here we go. I can't figure out how to stop it. Sorry. Okay. We're out.
Terrific.
Wow.
That was fantastic.
It was, I'm going to stop this recording.